Right, so for this week's classic character profile, we are going to be looking at, I think, probably the final arm on the Windass family tree that we haven't investigated yet, and that is Eddie Windass. So Gary's been in a bit of trouble, spot of trouble above the last few weeks, and at no point has he reached out to his old dad for support. So we're gonna thought we'd have a look at about him. What if I say Eddie Windass to you, Gemma? What one word comes to mind?
One?
Yes.
Cake.
That's what I knew you'd say. I knew you'd answer. Eddie Windass, the cake maker of Coronation Street. He wasn't actually a baker. He was a taxi driver, I think. But he used to make nice cakes for people. I think when they first brought the character in, he was a bit of a scummy, scabby scam artist and a bit of an unsavoury type. But they decided it'd be funny if he was a really good cake maker in his final years there.
The three things I remember about Eddie Windass are lanky, stringy hair,
Yeah.
smoking roll-ups, and making cakes.
He was a real kind of Wayne Slob sort of person,
Yeah, he really
wasn't
was.
he? He was a vile kind of character, but I still
don't remember disliking him.
I didn't dislike him at all. I thought I look back on him very, very fondly, and I remember when I heard that he was going to be leaving the street, I was quite disappointed and shocked that it kind of came out of nowhere.
In hindsight, I would rather that he had stayed than Anna.
Oh, we will talk more about that later,
Okay,
because
all right.
I know what you mean. Poor old Eddie Windass doesn't have very much in terms of fact file. We don't know when his birthday is. We don't know what year he was born in. We do know that his brother was Len Windass, who we'll talk a little bit about later, and his wife, but not legal wife, his common law wife, much like Daniel and Sinead, was Anna Windass. They had a child together, Gary Windass, of course. He was born in 1986. And along with some other Windasses, Eddie made his first appearance on Corrie on the 14th of November 2008 before leaving. I'm trying to think of...
He did that, yeah. He got there and
rolled
then he left.
his last
that
roll
was the
up
chronological order of things.
on the 25th of April 2011. So I was quite surprised when I did the research on this, just how short his time on the show was. Not even 3 years. And in my head, I would have, if somebody had said, how long was Eddie Windass on the show, I would have given him a good 5 or 6. What do you think?
How long was it?
Like 2.5 years or so? Yeah, 2.5 years.
Yeah, I would have said 5 or 6.
Really surprised about that one. He was only in 187 episodes.
You wouldn't have even made it a full year these days.
I know. He was played by Steve Hewison, and I did have to look up on YouTube how to pronounce that one.
For once, we look it up.
Yeah, no, I can't remember.
Instead of getting to it,
I saw, and it was him pronouncing his own name there as well, because I don't know whether it's Hewison or Huison or
I thought it was
Hewson. No, Hewison, who's how to pronounce it. Now, Steve was born in Leeds, like Jack P. Shepherd. He's from the other side of the Pennines, and he trained at the Rose Bruford College in Kent. Before Corrie, he was best known for playing...
Lomper.
I've
Is
written
that really?
Lomper. Yeah, in the Full Monty movie. Have you ever seen the Full Monty?
I've seen it once.
I can't remember whether I've seen it or not. I know it's
very
a British classic.
It's one of these ones where it's like, it's very this film's arty because it's set in England and it's very grim, but there's also comedy. And that makes it arty.
When I think of the Full Monty, the main thing that comes into my head is Prince Charles thrusting in the post office line, which isn't even in the film. But yeah, Steve was in that. He also had a few smaller roles in, the likes of Casualty. He was in Where the Heart Is, The Royal Family. I think he was in an episode or two. Again, nothing that I'd seen him in before. Because I didn't like The Royal Family particularly. I know that's a bit sacrilege to say that. Andy Wyman was in The Royal Family as well for a bit as well. I don't know whether it was before Corrie or at the same time as Corrie.
I've watched episodes of it, but it's been so long that I don't remember.
I just didn't really click with me. He was also in Emmerdale for a little bit as well, way before he was in Coronation Street. In 1994 and 1995 he played a police officer there. So he'd also been in Coronation Street before he turned up as Eddie. He had 2 roles. First one was in 1997. He played a character called Michael Pierce, and this was the guy who was interested in buying the cafe from Alma. So when she wanted to sell up Jim's cafe, he wanted to turn it into a pizza restaurant, but he ultimately lost out to Roy, thank goodness there. And then he played a character in 2003 called Andy Morgan, and this was a bit more of an important character, although he was only in it for a few episodes. He was the brother of the guy who'd committed the murder, which had been witnessed by Angela Harris, because remember when they came on the street, they were in witness protection.
They were secret.
So when it all kind of came out...
Secret Harrises.
Yeah, when it came out why they were under witness protection and everything, this Andy
soapy.
Morgan character and his brother came and hounded the Harrises, or the... What was that? I can't remember what the name was that they came in on the street. No, it was something different. But eventually, he came to be Eddie, the character he is best known for. I couldn't find very much about his casting. Sometimes when I look up for things like this about when characters join the street, there's press releases and everything, you know, the usual, he's a bit of a da-da-da, he's a ladies' man, and he's a ducker and a diver, but I couldn't find anything about that for Eddie Windass. Just a couple of articles which had the original names of all the Windasses, because they're all going to be called something different originally, like Gary was going to be called Carl, I think, at one point, but Eddie, as far as I could tell, was always going to be Eddie from the start. There was an interview with the Telegraph, though, the Telegraph and Argus, not long after the Windasses arrived on the street, and Steve said, Eddie's a great character to play, he thinks he's hard, and he's the head of the family, but he's always one step behind Gary and Len. I remember them being his brother. Eddie's always up to silly scams. He uses crutches, but you may notice he doesn't always limp with the same leg. And I do remember that one for quite a while when Eddie came onto the street first. He was trying to claim benefits, wasn't he, like disability allowance or whatever. But he never could never keep up which leg was supposed to be his limping one.
A good tip would be to put a stone in the shoe of the foot that you want to have your limp in.
Right, Gemma, I'll let you kick things off with the synopsis of Eddie's time. What did he get up to?
In 2008, Joe McIntyre and David, because remember, Joe McIntyre was going out with Gail, and Gail's David's mum.
Yes.
So
Joe's kitchen fitter, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a kitchen fitter. They go and fit a kitchen. Weird.
As you do.
For Eddie and Anna. But the Windasses made out that they did a bad job to try to get it done on the cheap, and then David and Graham retaliate by ripping the kitchen out.
Yeah, Graham Proctor. Yeah, the Windasses, their first introduction was...
They were like the roughest, chaviest...
They totally were.
Worst characters.
They were
like,
very much
scammy.
of the kind of the Gemma Winter ilk, weren't they, on a bad day? Which I always think is funny when I think back to what Anna ultimately became, which is, you know...
Snidey now.
Yeah, exactly.
RP.
But she was completely playing along with this fact that they were trying to scam Joe and David out of having to pay for this kitchen.
And don't stop to wonder how people who are clearly renting their house, why they are getting a kitchen installed.
Never mind.
Because they get evicted. You can't get evicted from your own house for causing trouble. And then they rent number 6 in Coronation Street, which they moved into after the Mortons moved out. Mm-hmm. And that's right next door to the Platts.
Yeah, so number 6 is the cursed house where the families can only stay for a couple of years before ultimately there's nobody left in there. It's where Yasmin is at the moment.
So Anna and Eddie tried
Holding
to make
on in there, Yasmin. Come on, you can do it.
Up with the neighbours because they want to get on with people.
They're behind enemy lines now, and
But David,
know thy enemy.
David and Gary continue the feud, and this is you go right back to the very beginning of these two characters. Have never liked each other.
No.
You wonder why Gary even thought to ask David to plead his case.
Well, I mean,
with Sarah
they
Louise.
became more friends, and they've been a lot more civil to each other in the years.
Well, the bad blood goes back all the way to 2008.
They were really at loggerheads right at the beginning. So in 2009, this is when Eddie got his job at Street Hearts. Anna basically...
Street Hearts, that would be a really great dating app for Coronation Street characters.
Well, doesn't it?
That could be our segment when we do romance.
Yeah, Street Hearts.
Street Hearts, award for the week. Who's the best lovebird?
Anna had to nag him into getting a job because, as I said, he came in and he was trying to claim benefits and everything, but she's like, we're not getting enough money and you need to get out there and you haven't got anything wrong with your leg, go and drive a taxi. So he did. And he basically, in the first year, he was not really ingratiating himself very much to the residents of the street or the viewers. He was just a big scuzzy scam artist. For example, he started up a darts team, and then he rounded up all the people. I can't remember who was on there, like Lloyd and Stephen, whoever, and he got a load of money from them as, I don't know, team fees or something. And then he went off and pretended he'd been mugged so he could keep all the cash. Unfortunately for him, when a rival darts team, when they had a darts competition in the Rovers, I think, and then the people from the other scene recognised Eddie because he'd pulled the same stunt against them 2 years before. So he got caught out there. He also, and this is a story that I really remember really well, I don't know whether you do, because Anna worked at the cafe at this point, I could somehow, and I can't remember how it was exactly, he got Roy and Hayley's cash and carry card, because they obviously go there to get all their stock
Costco card.
Exactly, like a Costco card, so they can get the stuff at the cafe. And he goes along to the Weatherfield Costco, pretending to be Roy.
Pizza and hot dogs.
No, cheap booze, would you believe it?
Ugh.
And they don't. I haven't seen this done in fiction for a very long time now. But he was their 1 millionth customer, and I remember there was when we were little.
I know.
That was a plot device, wasn't it?
All the time.
Everyone was always the millionth
They
customer.
were either always the
customer,
millionth, or they were the 999,990.
Yeah, and the person after them in the queue was.
And they were their enemy.
Yeah, that he was the millionth customer. Roy Cropper, aka Eddie Windass, and then he gets a big cardboard cutout of himself made, looking very shifty, and Roy Cropper, millionth customer, written on it. And then when Hayley goes over to the cash and carry deck, she sees this, and again he is caught out.
See, this is
he wanted to do it, but he won. He didn't want to win it, of course, but he ended up getting a European holiday from this, and then it was like we can't really go because it's supposed to be Roy that's having this holiday.
Can I just change the name on that, please?
I don't know whether he tried to say to Anna, "Oh, I bought you a holiday."
Sounds about right.
This is around the time, and I don't know whether when the Windasses came onto the street, it was made clear that Anna and Eddie weren't married, because I think I used to think that they were because they had the same surname and everything. But it was mid-2009 when there was a little story where Eddie proposed to Anna again, and it became apparent that he'd asked her
times.
lots of times to get married, but she wasn't interested in that. She's a modern lady. She doesn't need a ring on her finger.
Okay.
So then basically the rest of the year, I don't think there's quite so much scammery from that point onwards. Anna and Eddie get caught up in Gary's dodgy business, which was things like he got sent to prison after he took part in a robbery of Audrey's house. I think this is when, if I'm remembering rightly, it was David, who was Gary's enemy, pretended to, be his mate and say you should go and rob this place, but it was actually Audrey's, and he got. I think somebody had a heart attack there. It might have been Ted or something that had a heart attack. So anyway, Gary goes to prison, but when he comes out, he is a reformed character and he joins the army. It was Ted, because he, as you
Ted.
remember, Ted.
Yeah, I know
Grindelwald,
Ted. Yeah, he was Audrey's gay husband.
Not husband.
Dad.
No, lover. Yeah.
Lover implies current.
Well,
ex-lover.
Yeah. There was a bit. They were at loggerheads as well a little bit, and I remember there was a scene in the Rovers when Gary was making fun of the army veterans. I think it was like on a Remembrance Day sort of time, and Gary was making fun of it, and Ted stood up and said, "Look, I knew people who fought in that war, and you're making a mockery of them, and show a bit of respect." And then Gary had a bit of a turning point there, and this is when he joins the army, and Anna and Eddie are very proud of him.
Ah, bless.
Ah, indeed.
You want me to do this, I guess?
Yes.
2010, Gary gets sent off to fight in the war.
What war? Don't remember.
Don't talk about it. After a party in the Rovers with a hand grenade shaped cake from Eddie. A supportive dad. But he absconds, returns to the street, and then Eddie reports him to the military police as he feels that Gary has to stand up to his responsibilities.
I like the whole thing about the hand grenade cake. I think it was a nice little quirk ready to have, because having cakes in the shape of something is a nice little recurring gag that you can have, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so, but it's not very sensitive, especially in light of what happened to Quinny.
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a blown off leg in the shape of or anything.
I was reading a thread about American soldiers because apparently some children in schools in America are sometimes asked to write cards to soldiers abroad to thank them for their service.
I bet they are.
And some of the things that the soldiers say that the weird stuff that the kids write. One of them said a kid wrote them a card that said, "Thank you for dying for your country." And the soldier's like, "I really hope not." Anyway, and Eddie and Anna decide to adopt a new child, not Gary, because he's already theirs.
He's gone to the war. He's not.
We need a new kid.
Need a replacement. Just get one in there just in case.
Should have had an heir and a spare, shouldn't you? It's Anna's idea at first, but then Eddie slowly warms up to it. But also at the same time, we had another storyline with Steve and Becky wanting to adopt because Becky couldn't have children. Or she thought that she couldn't have children.
I think this was probably around the time that they'd been looking after Max, and then maybe Max went back to Kylie.
Yeah.
And they had a child-shaped hole.
Becky was such a sweet mum.
They compete. Max was just adorable back then, wasn't he? Max, blimey, he was such a sweetheart, that boy.
They compete for a child because apparently that's how we do it in this country.
You can adopt a child first.
You got to throw this beanbag in a hoop. Eddie pretends that Anna's nephew is a child that they have been given by a fast-tracked adoption process to try to make everybody jealous. And then Anna finds out and she scolds him, but then
And then she has a go at him again.
Yeah, because the kid drops food colouring on the sofa, and it turns out that Eddie had not been keeping up with their home insurance premiums. Wah, wah. Eddie and Anna then find out that they've been approved to adopt.
Yeah, I think they were, and Steve and Becky weren't.
What can you say?
Sucks.
They've got an arcane method over there at the adoption agency. Gary goes off to Afghanistan, and he is injured in a blast that kills Quinny, which I assume was with a grenade.
No, it was with a birthday cake in the shape of a grenade.
And I assume Gary was like, "Call back." Anna is devastated, and Eddie is moved to tears when he visits Gary in hospital, no doubt feeling some small measure of guilt for the fact that he made him.
That was sweet.
Go back.
It was nice to see that Eddie had a bit of heart in there. He'd really been softened by this point. As I don't think that the viewers were really taking to him just being a bit of a con artist.
Yeah. Gary, when he comes back home, is suffering from PTSD, and he ends up shoving Anna and punching Eddie during one of his episodes of becoming overwhelmed.
Do you remember... I don't remember, was it during the live episode, I think? Gary was trapped himself in a house somewhere, and there was lots of weird camera work and everything, and he was there with cradling his head in his hands in the middle of one of these PTSD episodes. That was some quite good stuff. Although he seems to be over it now. And that was almost it for Eddie, because that was around Christmas time, which was when his exit was announced, and 2011 was just the final few scenes for him, really. In early 2011, Anna and Eddie started to foster Faye. She was only 9 at the time, and now she's doing her exams. How time flies.
Oh.
She's a little bit of a troublemaker at first.
Oh, it's because she came from an illiterate father.
That included telling Gary that Eddie had been hitting Anna. Didn't Faye also accuse...
J'accuse.
Didn't she tell Brian that Owen had been hitting Anna?
She also killed all of Owen's fish.
I know she did. She was all right.
She was a horrible child.
Yeah, she's grown out of it now, though, by just not really being in the show anymore.
Yeah, they're like,
they
you're
don't
just
put you in an episode.
Awful.
No, I think she's turned into a very respectable young woman, and I
She's
wish
turned
that
into quite
I
the
wish
little
that there
swat.
was more Faye. Actually, lots of people don't like Faye and have never liked Faye, but I've always, been fighting for her corner. I'd like to see a bit more of her. Now she's a bit older. At this point, Eddie did not like. He just didn't get on with Faye. Obviously, she was saying all this about him, and he says to Anna, "Look, you're the one that cajoled me into this adoption malarkey in the first place. I never really wanted to do it." I think we should get rid of her, give her the old heave-ho. And then I was like, no, we've adopted her. We need to stand up to our responsibilities. We really fought for this adoption.
You can't unadopt, you have to kill them.
Yeah, exactly. Send her, wait until she's 18,
Send
her
her
off to Afghanistan, and we can have women in the army now and everything, and maybe she'll
she can
get
go on
blown
the
up
front
by
lines
that.
eventually one day. Or
just...
maybe we can wait a bit longer and she might be the first woman on Mars.
And then they can't bring them back.
Exactly, no returns.
Eddie is offered a job in Germany with Len, and he says to Anna, well, look, you got to choose between me and Faye. And she picks Faye. So he bogs
says,
off to Deutschland.
Auf Wiedersehen.
He does, yeah, exactly. And that's
was about it for my
very
German.
Abrupt end of Eddie Windass.
I admire the gumption of anyone who clearly can only barely speak English.
I know.
Characters on this show are always going to countries where they clearly don't know the language.
You don't have to. They all speak English.
They speak English, and if they don't, you just point at the fish and chips on the menu.
But I don't know how well a German would be able to understand Eddie's English, because he was always just... He was a bit of Ozzy Osbourne,
yeah,
but
he was.
a bit northern,
yeah.
wasn't he?
I think you'll find Ozzy Osbourne is a bit northern,
Well, he's
isn't
from
he?
Birmingham, isn't he, Ozzy
Well,
Osbourne?
to me, that's north.
I think that's right. So, yeah, it was just a really, really abrupt ending for Eddie, I thought.
Yeah.
They didn't give him enough. And it seems like there was maybe, like reading between the lines, a bit of bad blood between Corrie and Steve when he left.
This was the early days of Twitter, when everyone was not so guarded as they are now, and not so managed.
Yeah, well, the exit was kind of revealed to the world on the 5th of December 2010, so that must have been the week of the tram crash. So I don't think the bad press was what Coronation Street wanted at that time, but at least they were able to bury it underneath the rubble of the corner shop, along with Molly.
Too down on Eddie Windass. I don't think that it was particularly bad news for anybody that Eddie Windass wasn't going to be in it anymore.
No, I know, you're
it's
probably
not like
right.
devastation.
Anyway, he'd been axed, and then his Hewison's response on Twitter just came across a little bit bitter. He said, to be honest, I'll be glad to get on with things. It's all unreal there anyway. No challenge. I'll miss the money and a few good friends. Do you know what I'm really looking forward to more than anything else? A right bloody good haircut.
Well, what a way to go.
That sounds like somebody who was pushed rather than jumped, wasn't it?
Sounds like somebody who's over it.
But Phil Collinson, who was the producer at the time, was like, oh, no, yeah, love it. I've loved watching Steve's portrayal of super slob Eddie, and with Gary still very much a part of Coronation Street, I'm sure it's not going to be the last we see of him.
And he was like, yes, it is. Goodbye.
Yeah. I think he burned his bridges a little bit.
I don't
and I'm not
know.
saying,
you can't.
That's how it seems, and you don't know, like...
This, but don't forget, you're viewing what he said through today's lens. Back in 2010, you could be a bit more honest on Twitter without it seeming quite so scandalous.
Yeah, maybe.
And also, if
you get sacked from your job, you're not going to be happy about that, really, are you?
I know, but they do say, don't go out with two fingers raised, because you might need references.
Saying it's not a challenge is like...
It might not have been, but that's not particularly...
He had a big interview in the News of the World where he kind of spilled all afterwards anyway.
What did he say?
I don't know, I haven't read it. But
oh, wow, what
a
great scoop.
But I'm sure he said something scandalous.
He's like, the cakes aren't real.
Interestingly,
when I went in there, I was expecting the challenge of making the cakes myself.
Yeah.
But it was no challenge at all.
When I got this job, they said he was going to be a star baker, and I thought, brilliant, a new skill.
Got my flour out.
Later in life.
I was buying books and everything.
Yeah, and they just give me a
set of collapsible cake tins gathering dust.
Maybe there was the skill of rolling a roll up. And getting his hair into that scraggy...
Oh, horrible.
I mean...
You have to really admire actors who are willing to... I mean, it's one thing being an actor in a Hollywood film where there are teams of people dedicated to making you look... every camera angle, the most flattering thing, and then afterwards they Photoshop your cellulite out. Whereas actors on things like soaps... especially the ones that play the caricature characters, have to put up with so much...
It's like what we said with Gemma before about how they make her look. My goodness.
I really admire... Because it's not a natural thing to want to look your worst on television, is it?
No. I like this quote from Grace Dent on The Guardian. She said, Gary's dad, Eddie, has no positive attributes to speak of, none. He's 6 feet tall with a collapsed orange sideshow bob hairdo. I love that description. And an ambidextrous limp which switches left to right depending on which social security officer is spying on him. He has a permanently fuddled expression which could be down to timanzapam, plain idiocy, or the fact all his good brain cells are engaged in working out how to rob your wallet.
Grace Dent's hilarious.
I think that is a pretty accurate description of him, to be honest, especially in his early days. Anyway, interestingly, that wasn't the last Coronation Street related project that Steve did. And the very next year, in 2012, he was the title role of the one-man stage show Fat Brenda, My Flamin' Story, which was written by Joe Parkinson, who was a storyliner for Hollyoaks and Emmerdale. And if you want to find out a little bit more about that, if you go onto the Coronation Street blog, coronationstreetupdates.blogspot.co.uk, do a little search for it, and Glenda went to see it. I think it was Glenda, and she gave it a really, really glowing review. I'd have loved to have seen this show.
What on earth was it about?
One-man show about Fat Brenda, and it was just him like there with his...
What, was he acting as Fat Brenda?
He was in drag. Yeah, as Fat Brenda, with his fag and everything. There's
stealing jobs off women, was he?
And basically sort of talking about his life on the street in a very kind of tongue-in-cheek way, and some gentle ribbing about how the state of the street is these days compared to the good old days. And, you know, not an officially endorsed Coronation Street project here by any means. But I would have found that quite interesting to watch. The 2012 was the year we started the podcast as well. So
I do remember us talking about it, to be honest.
Yeah. He's also, since then, he's had a couple of small roles in TV. He's been in Scott and Bailey. He's been in Doctors. The 4 o'clock club is a...
Is that like the 5 o'clock club?
No, 1 o'clock club was the one that Blanche used to go to.
I would always be late.
This is 4 times as good as that. No, 4 o'clock club... I had to look at this. It's a children's BBC programme about two brothers who go to a secondary school. No, one of the older brother is a teacher and the younger brother is a student there, and all the capers they get into. And Steve played one of the teachers there, I think. And he is still acting. He's doing short films and stuff at the moment, and then you can see a few of his works online at the moment as well. If you should be so inclined you can do to watch it. Yeah. So. I always thought of Eddie as being a very obvious attempt at a Les Battersby replacement character, because there were an awful lot of characteristics that they shared in being a real ne'er-do-well.
Oh, I like a good ne'er-do-well.
A bit of a scam artist. Oh. I mean, it didn't work because with Anna I know Anna became something that was a lot further away from how she originally came, but she was never Janice Battersby, was she? But Eddie was... I don't know, I don't think he had quite the same kind of spark as Les. He was always kind of miserable and kind of shifty looking, wasn't he? Whereas Les was often just like having a great time and boozing it up, and I remember him being a lot more smiley, but I look more fondly back on Les than I do with Eddie. What about you?
The trouble is, I don't think I watched it very much when Les was in it.
Did you not?
Well, I remember I was watching it when Status Quo was there. I just don't remember that much about Les Battersby as much as I do about Eddie Windass. But then obviously I know that Les was a very iconic character and Eddie Windass is sort of forgotten by most.
I think part of it with Les was the fact that he was in it for longer, and the partnership with Janice was a real good coupling. I really wish they hadn't split up Les and Janice. Neither of those characters worked.
Janice back. That's why I named my cow after her in Stardew Valley.
I would really, really love to have Vicky go back and then playing Janice again.
She would be brilliant. She would be a good kick up the bum for a lot of people.
Oh characters. Definitely.
Not like producers.
Tell it like it is. And it's funny because it's almost like Eddie never existed now. He was written out of the show, and he gets the occasional mention, doesn't he? I think Gary's been to visit him in Germany once.
I must say that I am shocked beyond belief that Gary has not had a variety of long-lost siblings crop up. It would be so simple, such a trivial thing to work in, because he's an only child.
Yeah,
Really.
he's
Faye's his adopted sister, and he wasn't he grown when he was an adult.
Yes.
By the time that she was adopted.
Amazing. She was adopted and he was grown in a test tube. So they're definitely not related.
Like a crystal. Yeah. One of those crystal trees you could buy.
Grow your own ginger.
A growth there on... You just kind of chink it off the side of the cardboard and plop it in the corner and then
put a
send it
builder's
off.
hat on him.
Send it off to Wharf.
Yeah. No, you're right. Do you... It's interesting that he's often not mentioned when he kind of needed to be. I think some people have said, well, Gary's been in these dire straits at the moment. Why doesn't he go to his dad for help? Do you think that with what Gary's going through at the moment, do you think that Eddie would be much help? How do you think if he happened to come back to Weatherfield for the story? Because I could
Garrett, what would he do?
I would kind of think that... I don't know whether Gary would say, look, Dad, I'm in real trouble here. Can you come over and help me? And maybe he's got a load of money or something by now. I doubt it, because he'll just spend it on booze and fags. But I think that I can see Eddie going to Rick and thinking, well, I'm a bit of a ducker and a diver just like you, mate. And he'd like go up to him and say, look, can we just try and come to some sort of arrangement about this? And
I'll bake your cakes.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I think... Yeah. Eddie would try and think that he's, a bad lad like Rick, and Rick would just totally obliterate him.
Yeah.
And make things worse for Gary, to be honest.
I don't know why now, more than any other time, he would call upon his father.
Well, this is the thing when parents move away on Coronation Street, isn't it?
When anyone moves away.
Yeah. They're dead to them unless there's a wedding, and then you've got maybe a 25% chance of being called back.
You've got a 25% of chance of being mentioned and a 10% chance of being on the end of the phone.
Yeah.
Going, what's that? You can't come, and a 1% chance of actually them paying for the actor to rock up.
Yeah. So we mentioned before about Anna and whether she improved or declined after his departure, because they broke up another family unit basically by having Eddie disappear off, and it was the curse of number 6 again. I would say that Anna got better after Eddie left, because if you listen to when we did our first character profile of Anna Windass, we were still quite positive about her then. This was in the early days of the podcast, and we were saying, she seems quite nice, she's fairly inoffensive, she's a bit of just a kind of mumsy-ish character.
Maternal, lovely figure.
And going out on her own meant that she got involved with Owen, and then, ultimately Phelan. And that was honestly the making of the character for Anna, for me.
She didn't really get involved with Phelan in the same way she got involved with Owen.
She was
sucked into his orbit. Don't.
I make no jokes about what happened in that hotel room.
No. Yeah.
She was, so I think that as sad as I was that they split up, it was ultimately good for her character. And I think I preferred her with Eddie than Owen, because I didn't really like Owen much, but it toughened her up, really. It gave her a bit of...
a naggy edge.
Yeah, it gave her a bit of a spirit back, of a bit of balls that she had when she started off in the show, and then she kind of lost for a bit.
Do you think that there would be a place for him on the show now? Can you see him?
I don't know.
Maybe when Underworld reopens as the cake factory that I'm gunning for, he could be the creative director.
Yeah.
Here's how you make a grenade.
Yeah, you call that a red velvet? Yeah, this is a red velvet. I don't know, because he definitely is in that. He's definitely in that group of caricature characters, which they don't really have very many of in Coronation Street these days.
I like them.
I would really like to see him come back, just as a bit of a tribute, just as a bit of a throwback to the olden days.
Seems unlikely now.
It does.
But it's funny because Gary's such a sort of mainstay character, and we've said before that he's a lot of people's favourite characters.
Yeah.
And you'd think that his dad would be asked back.
Yeah. I don't think he'd fit in, unfortunately.
I don't know. There's loads of people. Can you imagine? I can imagine a funny... What?
I do imagine if it turns out that when Gary went to Rick Neelan's office, rather than Sharon coming up as his heavy, it was Eric. Not Eric. What's it called? Eddie shuffles out as Rick's employee.
Yeah.
Could be.
I can imagine a funny scene where Moira is being a man-eater at the doctor's surgery and trying to seduce Imran, who's there to see if Toya's ready to finish her shift. And then he goes, and behind him is Eddie Windass standing there going, "Oh, you after a little bit of how's your father, are you?" And Moira would say, "Not with you. What, can I help you?" And he'd say, "I'm here to pick up my cream for you. My downstairs."
He was gross, wasn't he? Oh, Daddy.
But don't worry, it's going to clear up in a week.
Yeah. That's about it about Eddie. I wanted to just do a very, very mini character profile of Uncle Len, the
But
forgotten
we can do
Windass.
a whole middle section.
I don't
of Uncle
think we
Len.
can do an Uncle Len. He was only in 40 episodes. Now, you know we've got Adam Barlow playing Wayne Hayes at the moment, just to confuse us.
Well, me particularly.
Uncle Len was played by Connor Ryan. Not Ryan Connor.
No.
Connor
Don't
Ryan.
be confused.
And basically,
40 episodes.
Within his 40 episodes, he helped Gary to steal a bit of copper piping from the builders' yards to try and frame Joe.
Always a fun activity.
He tried
for
to persuade Tina to tell the truth about David punching Gary. So you remember when David and Gary had that bust up, and David punched Gary first, and Tina was like, "Oh no, it was David."
Yeah.
So
I do remember that because he did a quiz thing about it.
Yes, he tried to get Tina to tell the truth. He eventually managed to persuade Joe to convince Tina to tell the truth.
Was this man a real character, or was he just a tiny angel?
On a shoulder. I don't think any of the Windasses was ever an angel on anyone's shoulder. Yeah, he offered Joe a window fitting contract to get Tina to tell the truth in court.
That's how you do it.
But eventually Joe wasn't able to meet the deadlines to this, and that's what eventually led to his trouble with Rick Neelan.
My goodness.
All links up this.
It's
almost like somebody's been plotting this out.
Somebody's written this out.
And not just throwing a dart at a board and says, "Oh, loan shark story. Oh, dog poo story." I knew that one would get picked eventually. He offered Gary an alibi when he was accused of robbing that house. And then he went to Germany. And then Gary used his flat for a little bit when he went AWOL from the army. Mm-hmm. Gary went and stayed with him in his flat for a little bit. And that's all for Uncle Len. Just in case anyone's saying, "Who on earth is Uncle Len?"
He died.
Now you know. I'm not expecting him to come back, even less likely than Eddie.
It's me, your Uncle Len.
Although I don't know whether Connor Ryan gave quite the same kind of quotes when he was quietly retired from the street.
He was like, screw him. I've never liked it anyway. Emmerdale's far superior.
Right. There we go.
I'd rather be on Doctors.
Hopefully that was Doctors. Hopefully that was a nice trip down memory lane for some of you who've been watching for a little while. And if you've been a new watcher to Coronation Street, well, now you know all about Gary's dad.
By gum, I never knew that. You might be saying.
Dodgy, shady character.
Yeah. You could have guessed that.
What, based on Gary? I think Gary's turned out quite nicely compared to what he could have been with Eddie as his dad.
Gary was found under a cabbage patch by an elderly Franciscan monk who nurtured him through life and taught him to play the lute. That was never going to be his background story, was it?
No.